Hello, welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in, sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back. If you have, my intention is unity and oneness and the highest levels of love light. This video is going to be a reading of a writing that I recently did, which is a module or unit of information compacted within a poem that can be utilized for DNA activation, recognition of certain physics, and just basically a play on words. Some of the subjects and topics we're going to be covering are soma. We're going to be talking about the diamond, the water and the bond in the body. We're going to be talking about access points, cascading, which is the harmonics in the body. We're going to be talking a little bit about sound and some of the symbols that I utilize to share what's happening in the body. So many things, so much more. This is also going in depth about some of the technology that we are accessing. So if you're interested in tuning in, thank you for sharing in this time. And I'm going to read the writing, and then at the end, or towards the end, I'm going to start to explain the first half of the writing. I'll do a second video to explain the second half of the writing. This has to do with the brain stem. It has to do with certain points in the heart and our DNA. So I'll start off just by reading essentially what I wrote. I invite you to open your heart and feel into the packet of information that I'm about to share, because it does hold a frequency and an energy behind it that can actually be very stimulating for the brain and the senses in the body for some people. So I started off by writing squish, squish. As you allow these, and this has to do with the brain, as you allow these energies to cascade through you, you open to a scene. See in a movie, seen in a moving flow, a diagram of precision, perception, perceiving, perceive a vision, seeing a scene before you, a scene, an essence, a scope of magnetism. A scope of magnetism docking in, you perceive more. And in this univision, you access more. You see a square root, a point within a square, 2 times squared double, and then some, SUM, and then some soma. This has to do again with the brain. For as you add up, you create more. More what? A scale. All hail the king and the queen. A divine reunion arcing to a space, a point in space. Swing, batter, batter, swing. And here for today, we play. We play for today. Earth has achieved a goal, one might say, a ring up the ladder, a merger, an acquisition. A new concept is birthed, actualized conception. Imagine that. Imagine that. Imaging that. For we create a space, a code, an access node, an ability to access 2 axes, to access the axes, a cross-reference, a harmonic cascade, a braid that harmonizes a distinct pattern, a chord, an unbreakable bond, 2 of hearts. So 2 does this combine to create 1, an unstoppable force, an unstoppable dream. For many are dreaming in collaboration, and our thoughts spark a mark on the wheel, unstoppable, palpable, unshakable. For we reunify with the golden conjecture, play on words, a combination of patterns that create more patterns. Patterns never seen before, never before seen. We enhance the set and move it back into review. Time signature, drum, golden symbols, drum roll please. We know the ink has not set in. For in this particular set, it requires you not to overthink about how you connect the dots in this writing. For as you, me, connect pen on paper, your dots do the connecting for you. a written inscription transcribed onto lines, lines of productivity that produce a map, a production, an induction chamber of sorts. And we deduce that you will not, K-N-O-T, we deduce that you will not deduce the alchemical equivalent of written score in this writing, sheet music, sheet-o music, many different reference points, Requiem for a Dream. Let us move over and chase the graphics, change the graphics. For in this surge of written delight, energy signature transfusion, transmission, written sound, copies a holographic incantation, ink, canta, a delight of the senses, a holographic scribble, scribe, bell, scribble that creates a pattern, an incandescent diagram that splashes a score. Shall we say more? For what we are saying is indescribable, in the descriptive way you would say, or one might say, but we disagree. For in this filigree, there is a tune, a set, a beat of the drum. Feel it, the rhythm, ba-boom, ba-boom, boom. As you light up the script with this pen and paper and pen, it enhances your score, and you merge with more. Lights out, Ali. Float like a butterfly. Liquid courage. For this signature requires flight. Too heavy and you will not see. Too far away to reach. Honey. Golden letter alchemy. Drip, drip, drip. This does not allow access to just any one. It is a unification, fun incantations that create a space of code, a codex. Too many, and there will be one. Too many, there will be one. This playful song sound graph creates a pattern, a coil, slinky, a coil that satisfies a part of the brain, satiates, soothes, and enhances a neural network of pathways. It highlights a sensation in the cerebral cortex, a humming, a purr, a whirl, delicious pearl, pure URL. It livens up the stem, one might say, for all that is birth is from within. It creates a flare, liven up, lighten up, light it up. Lighten up this alchemical switch, juicy Lucy Lou germination. And as we access these seeds of consciousness with this rhythm, we spark a memory, a unification, a woven exchange of light, enhanced activation, letters of alchemy, fire letters. Chalk it up to a mathematical settee, soiree, sorbet, cabaret. For as we dance with this chemistry set, it creates a prose, strikes a pose, creates a chord, and the sound reverberates through the castle, over the river and through the bridge, under the moat, one might say. As we write, we quell a craving, we harvest a line, bringing into bloom a harvesting. Oh, that's a reference to the bee. A canonical antidote, anecdotal, a three-course, chorus meal, an alchemical conduction point. Let us change the verbs for a moment and create a different signal. As we access a dialect, change a chord, we change the string on which the chord is located, on the axis, point, on which it was coiled, birthed, penned. We create a line of energy and conductivity in the greater crater, the greater cavity, a tunnel of fluid motion, charging down the lane, penny lane, copper flow conduction, tutti frutti, a whole new wave of configuration. For within this chamber is a cavern that holds a crystal whale, a crystal screen, a shimmering coil of concentrated haptic translucency, a piece of eight, treasure map gold. The bridge is then created. A birdie, an open range shot right down the hole in one. How does it feel? Hold on to this liquid courage, Curage, for it harnesses a glue. Glue on, impact zone. Clue, on the game board of life. Who done it? The professor with the candlestick. Two of hearts. It activates a cavern. To everything, turn, turn, turn. It creates a tipping point in the bilge. Don't rock the boat, baby, but do rock the boat. I was hearing, don't rock the boat, baby, but do rock the boat. For this crystal cavern chrysalis has been sedentary for too long. It unleashes a chain, and I'll show you what I drew, of events that create an avenue, a venue. C, a silicone suction cup, a sea of Vasquez, viscous, a harmonious composition, a flower, a beautiful chamber of secrets, the honeypot, a golden glaze of alchemical conduction. For in this vision, double vision, she is unified, fires up, P-H-I-R-E-S, stairway to heaven of sorts. Come with me to the sea of love, a harmonious overture, a whole new region of space age love song, pole shift renewal superflux. That's it. So I know towards the end I kind of got into this. When I write these, it's music. I hear songs and I take all these pieces and points from what I'm hearing, and it all ties in with what I'm sharing. And essentially, this is all about the brain, but there's a lot more layers that are interlaced within it. So it isn't just the brain. We're talking about what's happening in the collective. And so I'll just go into a few of the pieces. The overture obviously is music. It's creating a scale and a harmonic. When we talk about the stairway to heaven, we're talking about the spine, moving up the spine. A lot of times we've heard about the nectar and the honey in the brain. We're speaking about the pineal gland. And a lot of this goes into the physics and biology and geometry and musicology, it's a play on words, of what's happening. And this is a living light codex. So even as I share with you what this means, I will continue to learn more and more and more. It's kind of infinite. But the basic idea is there is a mathematical codex that I'm sharing through the way in which I'm writing the words. And if you look at an actual alphabet, the alpha and omega, all letters have a spin, a currency, therefore a frequency that are associated with the words. When you combine them, they create a frequency. That's why when you read certain things, it stimulates something. Beyond just the idea that we're associating the mental picture with the word. That's a very logical interpretation, but there's a much deeper array, which is an electrical term, I believe, that's happening, and I'm just in flow about it. So reading this puts me into more flow, and I could just continually write. Let's just talk briefly and break it down just a bit. This has to do with when we go into this space and we allow ourselves to connect the right and left hemispheres of the brain, it literally creates stimulus in the pineal and pituitary gland. And this is also associated, so the coils in the brain begin to light up, and it allows us to interact with our environment and our bodies in such a way that we're able to access pockets of information, and it enhances our interaction with our environment all around us, and it allows us to tune into all of our senses. So we are then able to access the quantum field and pull from that quantum field in such a way that is unavailable to us if we're just in that left logical analytical brain. Yes, you can learn a lot, and yes, you can write down mathematical equations, but more than often, there's an actual hemisync that's happening for those who are really pulling information from their imagination, such as Einstein. And I know Einstein isn't the know-all, be-all, everything, but he utilized his imagination a lot and openly talked about that and encouraged it. And this has to do with electricity that actually is a viscous fluid that stimulates and hydrates the entire body once it's activated. So let's just play it with this a minute. I started off just by saying squish, squish, which I thought was funny, but what I've learned is just to let it happen, allow it to, because there's a double meaning to this. Everything in this is a double meaning. So if you look up the etymology of the word squish, because I thought, oh, it's just the brain floating around in the skull, it's squishy, right? For my very basic knowledge of what that word means. Well, it actually means squeeze or squash, to squeeze or crush. Now, years ago, thank you to whoever suggested that I do this, that watched what I was sharing. Thank you for that. Someone suggested on my YouTube channel, have you ever checked out Dan Winter? And I had not. Well, I think I'd watched a video many, many years ago and was blown away by some of the things he was sharing. And then I never knew who it was and never watched it again. And so I'd never really looked at his work. I think it was just a basic video that he had done. Long story short, he talks about when two pine cones kiss, they create a squeeze. And it's literally to crush or to squeeze means to crush, shatter, destroy, or break. So part of what I'm writing about is, in a lot of the things I'm writing about, is this cascade that happens in the brain. And so he calls it Planck fire. So he talks about, I'm using his, I'll try to reference and share his link, fractalfield.com. So I'll just share screen briefly here and show you a picture so you can get a visual of what it is that I'm talking about. So over here to the right, or I'm not sure if that's on your right screen, but you can see these pictures. He calls it Planck fire, perfected fractal charge collapse. So right here is the pine cones kissing, and it turns into, I think he calls it the mother star, or sorry, Dan, I know I'm really butchering this, but essentially it creates this beautiful shape that is the implosive nature. And he talks about gravity and the fractal and centripetal force. So we're essentially creating this centripetal force. And later in what I'm writing about, I talk about germination and the flower. So if you go here, even the standing wave, restored centripetal, I like to call it centripetal, but centripetal, because it's a petal, it's a flower opening, essentially, from that happening. It creates this charge, it creates this, this spark. And here's another picture, which is phase conjugation. So he's talking about fractality. This is obviously, I think, the books that he's talking about, but you can go on his website, which is fractalfield.com, and really check this out. It's the golden ratio. This is what we're creating, these spins. Okay, so if I go back to what I'm writing, as you allow these energies to cascade, and that's the picture. I should do a really better job of showing this picture. Okay, here we go. So I'm on his website, Planck fire. Here's the animation of this beautiful shape, integer, the hydrogen radii. It's basically proof this is the phase conjugate cause of photosynthesis. Woo, negentropy, all of that. And I guess I should probably read this book, but I encourage you. This website is very challenging to go through, but it's amazingly chock full of making sense of what I'm writing about. So back to the writing. So that's a cascade. As you allow these energies to cascade through you, you open to a scene. Now, this is a scene from a movie, a view, right? When you have a scene, it's representing something. It's offering you a presentation, and it's essentially a frame, right? It's something that's playing out, and we have a perspective as we watch it. We're able to see in when this happens. When we allow these energies to cascade, we hit this negentropy, coherence, heart coherence, and left and right hemispheres of the brain connect. You're able to see inward and to see more, seen in a moving flow. A diagram of precision, precision perception, perceiving, perceive vision. So that even is a play on words. What we're able to perceive, how we make, it's a diagram. It shows us what the measurements are. And we can see things with a different perception. So we see a scene before us, an essence, we can collect the essence of it. It's a sense of multidimensionality. And then a scene came up as well, who that's the collective that were credited for writing the Dead Sea Scrolls. And there's a lot of great energy in those Dead Sea Scrolls. A scope of magnetism. So I'm on Edom Online, and we're talking about scope. So we see a scope of magnetism, and the etymology of this is room to act. We're talking, and I wrote about a scene in the movie. So you see how all this ties together. Room to act, free play. So we see a scope of magnetism. This is a breakdown of the act, the scene. Room to move in space. Aim, purpose, object of attention. Also, the watcher, one who watches. So we become the observer, okay? To observe, and we see what's being observed simultaneously. To look at, to view. I just find that interesting. There was something else that popped up, and I don't know where it went to, but so what is magnetism? We see a scope of magnetism. Well, I could say, well, we're seeing what we're drawing to us, what we want to see. We're magnetizing it. But to go deeper, magnetism is electrical currents, electromagnetism, electricity. So we're able to see this, feel it. Whoops. What was I just on? Iron? Sometimes I accidentally click on things, and it's not an accident. But so magnetism is the class of physical attributes that occur through a magnetic field, which allows us to attract or repel each other, because both electric currents and magnetic moments, so it's electric and magnetic, of elementary particles give rise to a magnetic field. Magnetism is one of two aspects of electromagnetism. So it's all connected, right? And I'm sure there's a lot more that I won't be understanding fully, but so we have this scope of magnetism docking in. You perceive more. And in this univision, you access more. So obviously, this brain hemisphere connecting unifies not only the vision of what we're seeing with our physical eyes, it makes the pineal and pituitary gland one as well. And we dock in. So from a very basic space, docking is, you're unloading and unloading. So we're docking in and we're unloading certain things and we're loading other things, right? We're connecting, we're lining something up, like on a boat. But in the field of molecular modeling, for example, docking is a method which predicts the preferred orientation of one molecule to a second. When a ligand, whatever that is, okay, a substance that forms a complex, so it's bound to one another to form a stable complex, which I really like that. So we're talking about chemical compounds. So when we dock in, we're actually creating stability, which I found really funny because a lot of the stuff I've been talking about is we're creating stability by us going into our hearts and by us being in our brain. Literally, we're creating stability. We're docking in, and this allows us to perceive more. And I'm pretty sure there's more in reference to this word, but we'll get to that later. So I go on to further say you see a square root, a point within a square. And I just have to go back to docking because it's funny. I said this is like a module of information. And as I said that, I knew I was kind of opening up a can of worms. So let's open up the can of worms. If I go to docking, I always talk about the key, the dock, or I'm sorry, the key and the lock and the combination. Well, here we go. One can think of molecular docking as a problem of lock and key, in which one wants to find the correct, let's make that bigger, the correct relative orientation of the key that will open up the lock, where on the surface of the lock is the keyhole, which direction to turn the key after it is inserted. Here, the protein can be thought of as the lock and the ligand can be thought of as a key. So we're talking about the best fit. Oh, there's so much here, you guys, and I'm just going to come back to this maybe at a different time. All right. So this is so fun. Sorry, I had a little ping, but wait, there's more. I forgot. Back to scope, the scope of magnetism. The other definition for scope was the breadth, depth, or reach of a subject, a domain. So this was another definition of scope. And the breadth is countable and uncountable plural breadths, the extent or measure of how broad or wide something is. A piece of fabric of standard width, scope or range, expanding. So what I was seeing this as, we're expanding our domain. We're magnetizing more of that to us. We're widening it. And I do talk later about breadth and width a lot in some of my other writings. So I'm seeing the docking here, the connection in the puzzle. Yeah. So I had to get back to that real quick. So going back to this, you perceive a vision, an essence, a scope of magnetism docking in. This also has to do with the synapses in the brain, before I forget. Very important. So let's find that. Oops. I lost it. Where did it go? So neurons. So I'm on the neuroscience news and I love this picture. So we're looking at neurons in the brain that are firing when we go into this space and we allow this energy to unfold. And here it is. We've got talking about docking. And I think this is so fun. Neuroscientists have long known that brain cells communicate with each other through the release of tiny bubbles, packed with neurotransmitters, a fleet of vessels docked along neuronal ends. I'm sorry if I'm butchering these words, ready to launch when a trigger arrives. Well, sometimes, let me just pause just for a moment. So, sorry, I got a little bit off track, but basically we have, back into neuron, it talks about the resilience of our nervous system. And if you don't know what neurons are, basically brain cell-to-cell communication occurs at the junction that connects to neurons, a structure known as a synapse. At any given moment, neurotransmitter carrying vesicles are on standby at designated docking stations called active zones, each awaiting a trigger to release its load across the synaptic cleft and deliver it to the next neuron. Signal strength and speed are determined by the number of vesicles ready and capable of releasing their cargo to the next neuron. This is relevant to what I wrote about because, first of all, I have to laugh because I did a video. I don't know if I posted it. I think I did. And I was talking about this shape that I was being shown in the collective. And the shape that I was being shown in the collective, yes, looks like this. So what I had said in my previous video is I was guided to draw a ball. A bottle. So that's a bottle from my drawing. If you can't tell, we'll just kind of not worry about this for now. You can kind of tell better if I erase it. That's a bottle. And I was being shown that these that we are rising up. And my guides keep saying it's an uprising, which is a whole other video. And essentially, we're feeling this pressure of this bubbling up. But lo and behold, I didn't even realize I was speaking. I was offering two representations of what's going on. And I did say that this is happening in the body as well, but I didn't realize that it's literally happening in the body. So if I go back, that is what I drew, is a synaptic cleft, which I didn't know until I looked this up. So what I wrote, so just to kind of read again, ultrafast signal transmission between neurons is vital for normal neurologic and cognitive function. So at any given moment, neurotransmitter carrying vesicles are on standby at designated docking stations called active zones. Each awaits a trigger to release its load across the synaptic cleft and deliver it to the next neuron. So here's a picture of a synaptic cleft. Here's what I drew the other day about what's happening in our, sorry, I've got this on fuzz because my office is a mess. So you can see though that I was downloading some information I didn't realize I was downloading. I think this is important for a lot of reasons, and I'm clearly for a lot of reasons, but one of the things I want to focus on is if you go back to what this is talking about with how neurons, signal strength and speed are determined by the number of vesicles ready and capable of releasing their cargo to the next neuron. And I see this as symbolic as us, as humans, as starseeds, as people, as beings on Earth. We're actually helping to activate one another. And this type of writing causes the synapses to fire in a certain way and basically dock in, causes the brain to activate some of these synapses for certain people, and for myself, of course, because I'm doing the writing. That's why it's so important for us to be creative. I really want to play with this a bit, with these, the synaptic cleft, because there's so much more that's important here, and there's so many layers. Obviously, the human body is incredible, but there's a deeper meaning to all of this. A lot of times what I'm channeling in all of my videos has to do with sound. Everything is sound, everything is vibration. And this is a really good example for those who aren't really sure what that looks like, or what is it that people are talking about when they're talking about sound. This article right here, and I'm going to save this link. Let's talk about this briefly before we move on. So it's talking about neurotransmitters, which we've gone over. Here's the chemical signaling molecule. These proteins change shape, causing the membranes of some of docked vessels to fuse with the membrane of the presynaptic cell, thereby opening the vesicles and dumping the neurotransmitter contents into the synaptic cleft. The narrow space between the membranes, the neurotransmitter diffuses with the cleft. Let me skip. This is where I wanted it to go into. Due to thermal vibration. Now, what if the video that I talked about was talking about heat. We're heating up. We're getting hotter and we're vibrating at a higher rate. So, due to thermal vibration, the motion of atoms vibrating about their equilibrium positions in a crystalline solid, neurotransmitter molecules eventually break loose from the receptors and drift away. The neurotransmitter is either reabsorbed and then repackaged for future release or broken down metabolically. I wanted to just talk about thermal vibration because everybody says it's heating up, things are getting faster, things are getting hotter. And this is an analogous with what's happening in the body. Johnson-Nyquist noise is the electronic noise generated by the thermal agitation of the charge carriers inside an electrical conductor at equilibrium. And I was just talking in my previous video about we're finding our equilibrium. Thank you, universe. I'm getting goosebumps, which happens regardless of any applied voltage. Thermal noise, I think this is relevant. Oh boy. Thermal noise is present in all electrical currents and in sensitive electronic equipment, such as radio receivers, can drown out weak signals and can be the limiting factor on sensitivity of electrical measuring instrument. Thermal noise increases with temperature. Some sensitive electronic equipment, such as radio telescope receivers, are cooled to cryogenic temperatures to reduce thermal noise in their circuits. Oh boy, so I guess we'll play with this later. Can of worms. All right, so back to the writing. So we're docking in, we perceive more, and in this univision, you access more. This gives us a whole different perspective, and I'm going to provide the links to all of this once I have the time to put this all together, because it does take time for me to do this, clearly. But it essentially gives us a whole idea of what happens. We're heating up. And I was talking recently about how agitated many of us are feeling. You guys, this is like subatomic. It's not just happening in the body, it's happening as within, so without. It just shows the connectedness to all things. And it gives, for me, a new perspective on exactly what it means for raising our frequency and raising our vibration, and why would we want to do that. And, you know, I'm not sure about, I want to dive into this a little bit more, you know, maybe cryotherapy could help someone who, it could be that they're overly agitated, they're overly exciting this, and it might be good for the body sometimes to slow that down. I just did a video saying we're getting electrically stimulated by inorganic things right now. So this can kind of enhance all of this stuff. But from my perspective, it actually can have a positive effect if we're finding equilibrium. And of course, this is a, you know, we're using both of these as a play on words. Okay. So I'm sure there was something in here about the Dead Sea Scrolls that were relevant, but we'll come back to this. Okay. You see a square root. Now that was a play on words in itself, that one sentence. So you see a square and a root, like a tree. So I was seeing it root into something, the root of the square. So a square is a point within a square. We're going to play with that a little bit. And math is not my area of expertise. I'm just rolling with what my synchronicities are showing me. You see a square root, a point within a square, 2 times squared double, and then some, S-U-M, like you're adding them up, S-U-M, and then some soma. So let's start with that. A square, you see the root of a square. So what is the root of a square? Well, a square could be 4 corners, right? I didn't write a cube, I said a square. So there is something to this, which I will have to come back to because obviously mathematics isn't my strong skill set, but you see a square, you see a root. There's something having to do with the root in an actual shape of a square. And that would be a point within the square. And we'll get to that later. Anybody's in polymath there if you want to go into that, or basic math. Basic math would even be good. Okay, so 2 times squared double. Now let's look at this. You see a square within a root, a point within a square, and then some. So I know this whole thing is a code, but let's look at what a square root is. Well, square root is the square root of a number, is the value which gives the number when it's multiplied by itself. So it actually gives the number because it's multiplied by its, by itself. In mathematics, so it shows this. I love the little symbol here. 4 and minus 4 are square roots of 16. I know there's more in here, so let's come back to this. What I wanted to get to briefly is what happens if you look at a quincunx, which is actually the square with the circle in the middle. So there's an, okay, I just got it. So let me just go through this. It's a geometric pattern consisting of 5, not 4, 5 points arranged in a cross. And I write about that later, with 4 of them forming a square and a 5th at its center. A saltire, which might have been why later on I say settee or satire, or cross. Oh boy, I just went down the rabbit hole on this one. So that gives you an idea of what it looks like. Okay. So what's ironic is later on I talk about pieces of 8 and treasure, which we'll get to later, but the quincunx was originally a coin, which I find is funny, and they kind of remind me of pieces of 8. I also talk a lot about connecting the dots. So here we are connecting the dots, but let's talk about this. The 5-point stencil. So I'm just going to click on that briefly to give us an idea, because there's so many ways that we can go into here. So this is a cross, clearly. And now we're getting into numerical analysis. Given a square grid, so here we go, connecting the dots, tilings, Euclidean plane. I actually talk about this in a recording that I have yet to type up. I have so many. And it is used to write finite difference approximations, oh boy, to derivatives at grid points. Now, I just said the other day in a recording about differentiation, and I'm putting this together as I write this, but numerical differentiation. Algorithms estimate the derivative of a mathematical function or using the value, so we'll have to come back to that. So I'm seeing a connection here to many things I've written about. Will I write this? Sorry, guys. So let me get back to something a little bit also in. So you see a square root, a point within a square, 2 times squared, double, and then some. So there's more. We're adding this all up. We see this, but there's actually more to the picture. For as you add up, you create more. More what? A scale. All hail the king and the queen, a divine reunion arcing to a space. Now, I'm going to come back to that later, because the king and the queen is a reference not only to chess and on the board and the way in which they move on the board, but it's also a reference to the left and right hemispheres of the brain. And it's also arcing. So I'm going to come to that just for a moment and come back to the square and the mathematics. So here we are, an electric arc or arc discharge is an electrical breakdown of a gas that produces a prolonged electrical discharge. So when this happens, when we're connecting the hemispheres of the brain, when we're igniting the body in this way, the current through a normally non-conductive medium produces a plasma, which may produce visible light. So we think about our light body, we think about ascended masters, we think about the light, the halo that we see in paintings over people's head. We think about using the word "you're glowing," right? It is light, it's a glow discharge. I love this, an arc, so glow just discharge. It's just fun to look at this and really recognize what's happening on a very small scale in our body. And I could go into a lot more of this, but we'll come back to that again also at a later time, potentially. So we're going to start off here. I just looked it up on Google. I'm on a WordPress blog, and I'll share the link to this. And basically it's talking about visual program of the first civilizations in the Americas. This is more of a kind of like a historical interpretation of what this symbol means. And again, it's a quincunx, which we'll get to the mathematics later, and that would be, I'm sure, a whole other video. It's a quadrangle, earthly female symbology that is formed and bisected by intercardinal axes. So remember earlier, or later in the writing, I talk about axes, and I'm sure I will go back and change some of the spelling on this as I learn what it is that I'm writing about, that represent the sun's winter and summer solstice horizon markers at sunrise and sunset. And we'll go to, it talks about, it talks about it's a completion sign that represents the 4 cardinal directions plus the center or axis, joining the celestial and earthly realms, often conceived as a world tree. So I think of the tree of life, right? We think of oh boy, I could go into so many different layers there. I think of the body. It thus signifies an encompassing sense of the 4 winds, the whole world, or the total cosmos. So we're looking at as within, so without. And it's just been portrayed in a lot, but I love the picture that it shows here. So this is an example of the dot in the middle of the square. We have the cross here, and then we have the center line talking about the east, west, north, south, above and below. Okay. It talks about all the places that it's been worn. And impersonation, as used here, means to give a god a human form, as an incarnation, and not in the sense of pretender. Now that's a whole other can of worms. The dot in square referred to the 5th direction of the 4 cardinal and 4 intercardinal directions, or 7th direction, depending on how you look at it. And I really wanted to bring this up because 7 was actually coming up for me a lot, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was referring to, and maybe someday I will. Which is the center point of the terrestrial sphere, circle, the sphere. It's not just a circle, but it's it's not just one dimension, as well as the celestial zenith nadir axis. The center point also inferring the animating essence of life, Sami, and it makes me think of Samadhi, Sami, through the tinkoi, involving the bicephalic serpent, an encounter of the Amaru, big snake, light water, tinkoi, rainbow. Since the center point was the hub, where the rain roads from all directions met, and rain roads, streams, rivers, consecrated paths, carried the sacred essence of Sami. So to me, this is all about the body and the earth. It reminds me of ley lines. It reminds me of all of the energetics of the earth. But what we're looking at here, the center point. So the serpent is the kundalini that rises up the spine. It bathes the brain, and it's light, water, rainbow. So it's the light body. It's the glow. It's the snake, right? It's the brain. And it says bicephalic, which is the sacral, the obviously the reproductive organs, okay? The essence of life. So it's saying the center point inferred the animating essence of life. The brain, the sacral, the cerebral spinal fluid, all of it. And when those meet and come at the cross, okay, through the water, the cerebral spinal fluid of the water, this is when germination, which I talk about later in the writing, actually happens from my perspective. So it talks about rituals, engaging with bodies of water when they did these rituals. I just did a video saying, bless the water. That's a whole other, so it's talking about the sacred essence. The ritual of blood water exchange actually is happening in the body when our cerebral spinal fluid bathes the blood even. So this has to do with Kundalini. Now, the funny part about this is, as I was reading through this, I was just cracking myself up, because a symbol associated with the dot in square was the dot in diamond symbol that referred to the underworld journey of the serpent, the lower energy centers, the sacral chakra, the lower earthly centers, and a blood water exchange, the cerebral spinal fluid, that occurred in the meeting of the serpent and jaguar in the archetypal mountain or cave. The mountain or the cave is the brain. So the serpent and the jaguar. And the jaguar, I would love to dive into a little bit more, but from much of my Native American cards or indigenous cards talk about it being power. It represents power, but there's so much more. If you look at the diamonds here, and then you have the dot in the center, obviously they used that on this artwork. And I liked the fact that they continue to say the aquatic paradigm that determined the design of the triadic cosmos, the three, as a scheme whereby deity on the one hand and terrestrial creatures on the other could all be fed through a cyclic system of blood-water reciprocity. The sun-water cycle was the netted diamond pattern. Nets were a form of snake ropes that referred to the liminal realm where the tinkoy, shown on top of this vessel, connected the trinity of animal coessences that sustain the cosmos. Oh, I love it. Whew. There's so much more. And I'll encourage you to read this. It's talking about the possibility of earth renewal. It's talking about preventing supernatural forces and sterility and destruction from overtaking human communities. I mean, this is like ancient stuff. There's so much in here. It's juicy. Okay. So we can come back to that at a later time. So one of the things I wanted to mention, sorry guys, the lighting's really weird in here, but one of the things I wanted to mention was that as within, so without. So this is happening in our body, but it's also happening in the earth. And that's something that, you know, maybe I'll go into flow a little bit about and channel some information on that. But essentially that's what I'm seeing as relevant to what we're experiencing. Okay, so you see a square, a root, a point within a square, and then some soma. So I'm not going to go into soma, but what that writing was just talking about was soma. Soma is the juice, the life force that moves up the spine and essentially creates more. Now that has to do with procreation. It has to do with, obviously, I guess we could call it, I talk later about conception, birthing something. But also what it does is it creates luminosity is what I'm hearing. And this luminosity is what lights up the cranial brain, the synapses fire. And when you get synapses firing, you're creating more synapses. You're lighting up the brain and the synapses see each other. They're triggered, they're stimulated. And this creates more what? A scale, a harmonic, a cascade, a braid. So you then create more activation in the DNA. And in case you're not following at this point, you're going, well, what are you talking? What's creating this? This is a writing about what happens when we are in the heart, when we're in coherence, and we are essentially connecting the hemispheres of our brain on a regular basis, on a consistent basis. Now, when I wrote for as you add up, you create more. So again, we're adding up, we're moving up, it goes up the ladder, it goes up the spine, but also the more of us that do this, we are the synapses as humans. We're triggering each other. Some of us are triggering each other in a not so good way. No judgment, but we're triggering each other and activating each other because we are the synapses in the body of the cosmos from one perspective. We're electrical conduits. Okay, there's more. So if we look into, you see a square, root, a point within a square, double and then some. So it's double, I'm hearing double the Dutch. It's double, it's the rope, right? And this creates, and I just talked about snake ropes. I always talk about double dutch and the jump ropes, the snake ropes. So it ropes and opens up the coils in the brain, but also the coil. What else is coiled? The DNA, the patterns in the DNA. I'm hearing hieroglyphs. Ooh, so we'll have to play with that later. Okay, so you create this, you're adding up, we're creating more energy, and we're creating more soma in the body. And I'll come to the soma later because I think that is it takes a little bit longer to go over it. Now, if we go into the centered square, in elementary number theory, a centered square number, because this is a play on words, is a centered figure-it number. Now, when I wrote this, I wrote 8. Like, I didn't realize what that was, but what does that reads as figure 8, even though I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but it's a centered figure 8 number, and it's used by different writers. I'll have to come back to this because I don't know what that means. It gives the number of dots in a square with a dot in the center and all other dots surrounding the center dot in successive square layers. Oh man, I just opened up another can of worms. Okay, so again, I think we'll come back to figure it numbers. So let me just note that. So later I write 2 scales merged as 1, and I write swing, batter, batter, swing. Now this is a reference many times I've written about baseball and the baseball diamond and double the Dutch, and it's all these fun play words, but and also playing the game. And this, everything I've written actually ties together like a book is what I've been shown. So I'm tying together different things that I've written in the past to help make sense of what those things meant, what those topics meant. So we're looking at swing, batter, batter, swing, which is to me a baseball diamond. And I also write that we're creating a space, 2 scales merged as 1, a harmonic, an unbreakable chord. So we go back up, we're creating more scales. So we're doubling these scales, we're creating more synapses, but we're creating more. What is a scale? It's so much. It's balance, okay? But it's also musical notes. It's musical nodes. It's access points. It's activating recognition. We recognize and open because we're triggered, and this allows us to open to a greater scope of magnetism. We see more and we draw more to us in the electromagnetic activity of the brain, and we activate more of the brain. Not just, and I'm hearing hemisync. It's not just about, it's beyond that and beyond. So if you go back to the centered square, here is, I am on the centered square number, a centered figure eight number. I'm going to call it figure 8. And look, there's a diamond within this. And so we're looking at Floyd's triangle, which always reminds me of Pink Floyd. I'm sure that I had some synchronicity in there and just thought I was singing Pink Floyd. And just briefly, I really wanted to see that picture in a 3D image rather than just because if I went back to centered square, oops. Oh boy, but I wanted to see it in 2D before we'd seen that cross, right, with the stencil. And this is what it looks like inside of a cube. So here is the center point inside of the cube. And there's some other things I've recorded recently about us being on a game board, being able to see all different angles and all different directions. And we've expanded our game board, meaning we have more space than we realized. So this was just a really cool picture that I wanted to bring up to get a picture of what that 5-point center in the square looked like to me, or what it could represent. I don't know that it's the only thing that it represents. And if I go to that article, I just wanted to share, why is that relevant? Ooh, that's kind of cool, the simulation. Okay, let's play with this just for a moment. Laplacian. Okay, and this is really small, I'm sorry, but I'll try to make it bigger. The finite difference method is a canonical example of computational physics Stencil discretization, commonly used in applications ranging from geophysics, electromagnetics, weather, oil and gas, semiconductors and astrophysics, to gas dynamics, airflow, and plasma. Stencil codes are identified by an underlying requirement of accessing a local neighborhood of grid points, the stencil, in order to evaluate a value at a single grid point, meaning that the performance of the algorithm is strongly tied to, I'm guessing it's to, its memory access pattern. Woo, okay. So, this takes the form of the divergence of a gradient of a scalar field. My brain just popped. Poof. Okay. So I'm going to save this and kind of complete this a little bit and not end on this note, but say to be continued on this note, because I literally just fried out my software. But I do see a play on words here. Like, hello, we're looking at our memory access pattern. So I see this as literal, you guys. I see this as when we're doing this, we're actually accessing our memory patterns. And I know that that may not be the exact definition of what some people will interpret this as. But part of what I'm being guided to share is that's the point. How I play with this is my playing field. And it helps me to understand on a very keep it simple level what's happening. But on a very quantum level, it can show more definitions or domains or patterns in communication in how I communicate that are accessible. So we're not limited to A, B, C, D. This starts with this and this ends here, to a linear representation. It's a way of communicating in a quantum field. And so that's part of the reason I bring forward what I bring forward. So I hope that someone found this fun and informative, and I can't wait to dig in a little bit more. Of course, this is very time consuming, so I'm not sure when I will be posting the next video, but I do feel like this, and I just want to share briefly, this is one more thing, and then I'm really going to end for reals. I'm on paragraph 2. That's my second paragraph of this writing. And I've got about, I don't know, 10 paragraphs here, maybe more. No, about 10 paragraphs. So, or stanzas, not paragraphs, but I'm on this second portion. And I haven't even broken down the mathematics of this. I just scratched the surface. Do you guys remember that scene in Contact where they find the, I'm gonna have to watch it again, but it's a scene in Contact where they get the TV and they send out that signal into space and it comes back and it's like a television program from, you know, World War, Nazi Germany, and et cetera, et cetera. And then they decode it and there's actually a code behind the code, but they used that to, anyways, that's what's happening. It's like this, this is how we can operate. We can find codes in everything and reorganize it to make better sense of how to interpret the field. Okay, so now I'm for real then. So until the next video, thanks for playing. Namaste. Have fun creating that soma, activating that soma, and triggering each other to create soma much more. Love and light. In love and light. Namaste.